Welcome to the Circle of Life Coalition monthly presentation. Couple of housekeeping tips besides to mute yourself. We will have a reflection. We're going to introduce our sponsor, then introduce our speaker. There'll be time for questions after. You can certainly enter a question in the chat box. We'll read them to the presenter, and you'll be certainly, if you have some more questions, able to speak with the presenter after. There will be a poll at a point during the presentation near the end, and then we'll have a little bit of a wrap up. But we are certainly very pleased that you're able to join us today for this very important topic. The reflection today is more of a philosophical point. Life is what happens when we make plans. Attributed to many people, most famously John Lennon, and you can take it in a lot of different ways. But if we don't plan, we don't have a life. Sometimes they're fun plans, sometimes they're not so fun plans. But if you don't plan for the what ifs, then life can get too messy. And that's pretty much the point of our speaker's presentation, making sure that you do plan so that life, although messy, has a lot of purpose and a lot of things that you can make sure that happen the way you wish them to. All right, moving along. We are happy to have with us and our sponsor today, Country Meadows and Missy Langle, who will tell us about the exciting things that Country Meadows are doing right now.
Thank you so much, Deb. I really appreciate that. I'm actually with the Heritage of Green Hills now.
Oh.
No problem. After 13 years, you know, I was driving to work this morning and I was saying to myself, oh, please, Lord, don't let me say Country Meadows. So not a problem at all. Yeah. You know, it's really funny when you're in a business for so long and you just become part of that business.
So then I would put that under another if you wanted to enter it.
Not a problem at all. Well, thank you for having us today. The Heritage of Green Hills is honored to be a sponsor of today's event. Thank you so much for having us. A little bit of information about the Heritage, and then I'm also going to turn it over to Melissa Oley to talk about some wonderful groundbreaking opportunity and news. The Heritage has been here in the Shillington area since 2009, and they started to do the pre-sales in 2006. Currently, we are owned by Lapis Advisors. They are a boutique investment firm located on the West Coast. So they have just taken us over, I believe, last October. We are also managed by Life Care Services in the community. I'm not sure if you are familiar with them, but they are across the nation and they serve about 33,000 seniors. So they own and operate and also manage about 130 some communities across the nation. We are managed by them. So we have their buying power and the different wonderful properties that they have. We all work together on that. Currently, we have 197 apartments and villas here on the community, and we have 44 apartments in personal care and memory care. And one of the things that we are known for is our dimensions of wellness. We work with 8 dimensions of wellness. They are working with people to try to keep them out of the skilled setting a little bit longer. And we work with a director of wellness on this project, and they are all about emotional wellness, environmental wellness, intellectual, vocational, physical wellness, also social, spiritual, and we have health services here on the community that we're very proud of. With our new healthcare center, with Lapis, Benchmark is our construction company, and we're very proud that they just started digging ground on March 29th. So we're pretty happy about that. I am going to turn, Melissa, are you on?
I am.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn over the great news to Melissa, and her and I are going to interact together. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to ask. Go ahead, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you, Missy. As Missy said, we are in the process of the groundbreaking. I actually was up on the site yesterday, and some of the footers have been poured, and they were starting to pour some of the foundation walls for the new healthcare center. So progress is definitely being made. We're excited. We look at it on a daily basis, just hoping that next summer comes quicker than we realize. As she said, it'll be 70 personal care and memory care suites. It'll be between 1-bedroom and studio suites. Just excited because it's going to expand the possibilities of who we're able to provide service to, and also expand the amount of people that we can care for at one time. Currently, we do have, as Missy said, the 44 suites, which 9 are in our secure memory care, 35 in our personal care. We have availability in both of those areas at this time, and are able to accommodate individuals that are in need of personal care or memory care because maybe they're wandering or exit seeking at home. I think, you summarized pretty much everything else, Missy. We're just excited to be able to sponsor the event and to be able to be part of today's seminar.
And we would also love to have you at the Heritage Center. Please feel free to stop by and visit with us. We are now open to visitors, and we are doing tours and having family to have their visitors come and visit as well. So that just happened for us recently, and we are very excited about that. I hope everybody else was doing great during the COVID. Of course, that was a little tough on everyone. And hopefully we're looking forward to the year 2022 and see what happens in this year and next year. So thank you so much for having us today. We really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. And through the beauty of editing, it will be like my error did not happen.
No worries.
At the end, Gary will help us. Bill Blumer is a certified elder care attorney at Leisowitz Heller in Wyomissing. His practice is limited to matters involving estate planning, estate and trust administration, elder law, asset protection planning, guardianships, special needs planning, and fiduciary litigation. Bill chairs the Estate Planning and Elder Law section of the Berks County Bar Association. He's a past president of the Berks County Estate Planning Council and currently serves on the board of the Pennsylvania Association of Elder Law Attorneys. He serves on the board of special nonprofit organizations, including the Circle of Life Coalition and Easter Seals, Eastern Pennsylvania, where he serves as the board chair. We will be missing Bill from the Circle of Life Coalition. He will remain an integral part of our hearts, but he will be leaving to pursue other things. I know he will be available to us to listen to us and advise us as he can, but most definitely will be missed at our meetings. But without further ado, Bill Blumer.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. I'm going to kind of move back and forth this morning between just talking to you on screen and putting some things up for you to look at. I figured a lot of the slides, pretty much everything I'm going to say this morning is on a slide. So if you find yourself somehow oddly captivated by what I'm talking about, you'll be able to download the full text of what I'm going to go through. But just reading slides to you, I thought might be a bit dry, and it's nice to see people's faces rather than just looking at a screen. So I'm going to kind of jump back and forth and hopefully keep it a little more interesting. I think over the 30 so years I've been practicing law, I've probably given talks about powers of attorney, dozens and dozens of times, and what they are and how they work and all that kind of stuff. And frankly, I'm kind of assuming most of you have either heard that or decided you never wanted to hear that. And so I wanted to do something a little bit different today, because in my world, one of the biggest problems that I run into are people that have thought they did what they needed to do to be prepared for their potential incapacity. And all they did was get a power of attorney. And there were several problems with that. Number one, their power of attorney stinks. And we're going to talk today about why, in most instances, your power of attorney is woefully inadequate for what you're going to need. But they also did nothing to help the poor person or people that they named as their agents to be able to actually help them. You know, they come in and the agents are like, I don't know what my mom's assets are. I don't know where she banks. I don't have any idea how she feels about her health care. I don't even know what the heck is wrong with her. I don't know who her doctor is. How am I supposed to make these decisions? What am I supposed to do? And so what I really want to impress upon you today is that, you know, having documents is a nice thing, but if we don't do the extra legwork that attends their use, you're not going to have much to say for yourselves in terms of the quality of your planning. And Deb was absolutely right with her reflection this morning. You know, life happens, and it's going to happen whether you plan for it or not. It's just that if you plan for it, you have a much better opportunity to control the outcome, and we want you to do that. The first part of this process is understanding that your incapacity is not simply some abstract possibility. It is a statistical certainty. You are going to be incapacitated. Sometime between now and the time you die, there will be a time when you are not able to do some of the things that you're used to doing for yourself. And you'll either be prepared for that, and it's probably already happened to you, by the way. You've already been through periods of your life when you were temporarily incapacitated. You know, simply having been hospitalized for a few days, or having been stuck at home, you know, with COVID, unable to get out of bed, is a technical incapacity. So you're either going to be ready for this or you're not. And if you're not, you're going to be vulnerable to a variety of problems. And you're going to be vulnerable to a lot of predatory people that are suddenly going to emerge in your life. And, you know, my advice to you is don't let that happen to you. Your incapacity doesn't mean that you can't do anything. It's not a sense of like complete and utter helplessness. That's not the case at all. Most incapacity is kind of partial. It's just, I can't do a particular thing. And, you know, you may simply lack the strength to get out of your house and go to the bank. You may lack the mental acuity for a few days or a few hours to be able to, you know, manage your finances and pay your bills. You may simply be, you know, out riding mini dirt bikes with Wendy, and you can't get a good internet connection, and you got a bill to pay, and you can't do that. And that's, in a sense, a technical incapacity. You can't do what you need to do to run your life. So if you're like my son in college, who had nothing medically wrong with him, he was just a dope and forgot to order checks for his checking account. And so when his rent came due, he couldn't pay the rent. So he had to call his dad and say, Dad, I can't pay the rent. And I had a power of attorney for him. So I bopped over to the bank, got a counter check, wrote the check out, and paid his rent. He was completely and utterly incapacitated as far as I was concerned at that moment. And because his 18th birthday present was a power of attorney from his weirdo dad, he was in a position to address that situation. So it's not, you know, you're lying in some full body cast somewhere and unable to do things. That's not what we're talking about necessarily. That's certainly incapacity, but that's not really what we're talking about. So I'm going to share with you, hopefully, this little slide. We're going to work through. So hopefully you can see a white screen on your computer that says the most effective response to incapacity is planning. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. So you have to recognize that you have this problem. If what I just said to you doesn't register with you, well, then you have an even bigger problem. But that's the first issue. You have to understand that there's a reason to be concerned about these things. Then you have to get the right documents. And we are going to talk about that. I'm going to give you some things that you could pull out your own power of attorney if you have one and review it. And I'll illustrate to you why in most respects your power of attorney stinks. And we'll examine the particularly smelly omissions from your document. Then you must get organized. You have to get your own life in order so that someone else can jump into that life and begin doing what needs to be done. And you have to have a conversation with the people that are going to help you. If you have not bothered to talk to them, and I'm not talking about a single conversation of, hey, if something happened to me, would you be willing to be my agent? It's a lot more than that. You need to have a series of ongoing conversations with them just to keep them up to speed on what's going on in your life and how they could jump in and help depending upon the type of situations that could come up. Then you have to realize once you've done all of that, you've got to go back and start it all over again. You've got to repeat the second process of getting your documents right, because if you get a good power of attorney today, I can almost assure you that in 5 years, it's not going to be as good as it should be. And there's really no reason not to have a good one. So you're going to have to repeat this process of updating your documents. You're going to have to repeat the process of getting organized. The assets that I owned 10 years ago are different than the assets that I owned now. So even if I had gotten together and created lists and all my accounts and all my account balances and everything else, it's a moving target to understand what's going on in my finances. It's a moving target to understand what's going on in my healthcare. So we cannot simply write it down like some Ron Popeil television oven that you set and forget and just stick it over there and assume your rotisserie life is just going to cook itself. It doesn't work that way. Things change. So we're going to need to repeat that process. And then you're going to have to repeat those conversations because you need to keep the people updated about how your life is changing. And then you have to continue that process until you die. This is not something that you can just do and forget. So, sorry if it felt like maybe we could get away with doing this in a once and done fashion. It doesn't work that way. And that's because your life is not static. Everything in your life is changing. And so, the people that you would pick to be your agents will change over time. The people that, you're close to, families blow apart over Thanksgiving dinners because somebody said grandma's turkey was too dry, and how insulting was that? And, everybody knows grandma's turkey's dry, but we just don't talk about it. But somehow, somebody decided that was a good thing to talk about. Everybody got upset. Now we don't want to have that person in our lives managing our affairs. They may not be able to continue in the role that they originally thought they could help you with. Their lives change. So that's a change in your life as a result because of how interconnected we all are. Your life is not like some, elevator that arrives on the floor and the doors open and somebody steps into your life. Your life is more like a moving freight train, and you're asking somebody in mid-trip to jump onto your freight train. All I'm asking you to do, you're not going to slow down your life. You've got to work on getting your agents up to speed. And that's the part about this process that so many people neglect. They will come to me, get a document, stick it in the little fancy folder that I give it to them at the end of the appointment. They go home, they stick it in their filing cabinet, and they tell themselves, well, I got that taken care of. What a load off my mind. I'll never have to worry about this again. Really, a lot more to do than that. So it's an ongoing process. We're going to have to talk about documents as part of this. That's the lawyer part, sorry. But it's necessary. So I'll make this very clear. Everyone needs a good financial power of attorney. You need it when you turn 18. You don't need it when you're old. You need it always. And it has to be updated. So no matter how you got that document, if you have that document, just based on the number of times people walk into my office, I had to take a 3-hour drive to Center Valley, Pennsylvania yesterday to meet with a man to update his power of attorney because he's going to likely be going into a nursing home in the next year or two. And he last year went to a very competent law firm up in the Allentown area and got a power of attorney that was completely inadequate to the task of a person about to enter a nursing facility. And so he had to pay me for 3 hours to drag 4 people up to his house so that we could oversee the execution of that new power of attorney. And I felt bad because here's a guy who just spent a bunch of money with an attorney less than a year ago, and he's now coming to me and I'm having to say, I'm sorry, you know, the person that drafted that document for you really didn't know what they were doing in this context. It's perfectly traditional power of attorney, but if you're going to be doing, you know, long-term care planning, it wasn't anywhere close to what was necessary. And, you know, for me, most power of attorney documents are the equivalent of sending an art major into her senior design class with one of those little boxes of crayons that have 8 crayons in them. I don't want an 8 crayon box when I go in to do my final thesis for my art project to get my art degree in college. I want the 64 box of crayons with the sharpener in the back. That's the kind of power of attorney that you need. It should not usually in any way limit the power and authority of the agent to act for you, because there's absolutely no way for you to know what you're going to need and what you're not going to need when particular situations arise. So you give the agent all of the tools that you could possibly give them. If you're reluctant to give an agent that level of a power and authority over your life, that's the first clue you've picked the wrong agent. You shouldn't be worried about how much power the agent has. You should be worried about how the agent wields the power you've given them. And if you're worried about how they're going to use the document, then you shouldn't name them. They obviously don't actually enjoy your trust. And because these documents are so powerful, you cannot put anyone in a role of an agent as if you don't fully and completely trust how they're going to handle your affairs. So I see lots of powers of attorney that are really not quite what I would want. So I'm going to jump through and we're going to look at particular problems. And I'm going to share my screen again so you guys can look at this. How to tell if your financial power of attorney stinks. This is 3 slides of stinky. Number 1, does your power of attorney authorize your agent to give away all your assets? If it does not, your power of attorney stinks. Oh my Lord, why would I want to let my agent give away all of my assets? Because there may be very valid asset protection or tax planning reasons for doing that. Oh, but that means the agent would be able to steal all my money. No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. The overarching goal and rule for an agent is everything they do has to be for your benefit. So if they take an action, they have to be able to show that what they did made you better off than you were before they did it. Now, it's very hard to give away somebody's assets and say they're better off. But I'm here to tell you, it is not impossible. For example, you might have a husband and wife. Husband is entering a nursing home. They own a home. That home is owned jointly. There are excellent reasons to retitle that house into the name of the wife alone. Because God forbid she dies first, and now my husband in the nursing home becomes the owner of a home. Somebody living in a nursing home needs a house about like they need a hole in the head. So what's going to end up happening? They're going to sell that house. The money that they're going to sell is now going to be required to be used for their long-term care, even if they had already qualified for Medicaid for that care. Now they're going to get kicked off of Medicaid. Is their care going to change in any material way? No. But by virtue of the fact that they owned the house jointly, we set that in motion. I can't retitle a house from husband and wife into wife unless the husband can understand what he's signing when he signs the deed, unless I have a power of attorney with an unlimited gifting clause in it. So I have to turn away some people when they come to me because I can't help them, simply because they don't have that power. And if they're going to steal your money, they're going to use the banking clause that is found in every power of attorney. That's the one that says I can go to the bank and close your accounts. I can go to your investment house and close your accounts. That's not a gift. That's just withdrawing money. So gifting clauses are not dangerous. Contrary to what a lot of attorneys will tell you, they're not dangerous. The banking powers are terrifyingly dangerous. All these things are dangerous. That's why you have to trust the person you're giving it to them, the document to. Does your power of attorney authorize you to change beneficiary designations on life insurance and retirement plans? Many do, in fairness to the garden variety power of attorney, but not all. And if yours doesn't, it stinks. Does your power of attorney authorize you to deal with digital assets? We just got a new Digital Asset Act last year. Very few people know that, but your Facebook account, your iTunes account, your Instagram account, these are digital assets. And you might be surprised what the little thing that you never read that you just clicked on I agree when you signed up for, Facebook says. But it basically has a lot of things in there that you probably wouldn't like. And one of them is we don't deal with anybody except you. No powers of attorney, no executors when you die, no trustees, no guardians, nothing of that. We only deal with you. Well, we had to pass legislation to kind of change some of that. And it would be nice if your document made mention of the agent's ability to deal with digital assets, including your online bank accounts. Does your power of attorney allow your agent to name his or her successor if you cannot do that yourself? Rather unusual to see that power, but it's allowed. You can, if I have named an agent and my agent says, oh man, if I go down, there's nobody here to take care of Bill. And Bill is no longer competent to make a selection of another agent. So we're either going to have to get a guardian or I would need the power to name a successor. Well, if your document allows for that, then great, you have a better power of attorney. Most don't. Does your power of attorney discuss your estate planning objectives? It should. A lot of these powers are going to be used to facilitate your estate plan, which is an ongoing exercise. And if you haven't bothered to explain in the document what your goals and objectives are, it's much harder for your agent to know what to do. And it's also harder to hold your agent accountable. Because if someone's challenging what the agent did, they can point to the objectives that you laid out in the document and say, all right, explain to me how this preserved Bill's assets, preserved his opportunity for long-term care, reduced taxes. How did it fulfill the terms of his will? Or how maybe did it do violence to the terms of his will? So having that language in there can be very protective. Does your power of attorney go into effect when you get sick? Or does it go into effect at the time that you sign it? It should go into effect when you sign it, not when you get sick. That's called a springing power of attorney, and springing powers of attorney are probably the worst thing to ever be conceived of in the world of power of attorney documents. They sound like a great idea. They're fundamentally stupid and misguided. And if you have one, don't have one. Change that. Nothing, and I mean nothing good, will come from a springing power of attorney. Whatever protection you think it's going to give you, it won't. Whatever mayhem you think it's going to avoid, it won't. For the simple reason that doctors are no longer allowed to run around town telling all the bank tellers in the city what your medical problems are and why you're not able to manage your affairs. That's a violation of HIPAA, and they're not going to do it. So how are you going to prove to the bank teller that you're incapacitated so your agent can now act? You can't. You're going to be tied up dealing with the bank's legal department for months, fighting with the hospital's legal department. None of that is good. Does your power of attorney name multiple agents but have nothing to say about what happens if they disagree? The rule is majority rule, but most people that have multiple agents have two. So I say yes, my co-agent says no. What are we to do? I don't know. I guess it's a one-way ticket to court to have some judge decide. Not the outcome that you would want. A little tiebreaker clause would have been very easy to put in there, but most of them don't have that. Does your power of attorney name a successor, but then go on to say nothing about whether or not we can determine how we're going to determine if the first agent can act? I just got done telling you that springing powers of attorney about it. Imagine if you have a power of attorney that says, my spouse gets to act for me, but when my spouse can't act for me, then my son gets to act for me. Did you ever think, how is your son going to figure out how to prove to the bank that your spouse can no longer act. It might be nice to have a little clause that says, if my son tells you that my wife can't act, you're entitled to relieve him. You cannot be liable. I release you from all liability for believing him. That would be much easier to get the bank's legal department to start working with your son. It might not be such a good idea to even have successor agents. Sometimes it is, but not always. You might want to let them act at the same level. I name my spouse and my son, and I allow them to act independently of one another, and I just have a private understanding that my son isn't going to do anything unless and until he figures out that my wife can't act. But the issue about whether my wife can act or not is a private family matter, not to be shared with the bank. The bank doesn't care. If my son shows up, as far as they know, he can act. Nothing tied into my wife's ability or inability to act. Does your power of attorney allow your agent to delegate some powers? I may not want to stop being your agent, but I may be going on a vacation for a week, and so I want to delegate my power to a third party. Well, you can do that in a document, but I'm willing to bet your power of attorney doesn't let them do that. And then finally, the stench of your power of attorney will continue here. Does it say anything about what duties your agent is going to have? How is your agent to know that she's not supposed to commingle your money with her money unless you told her that in the document? Does your power of attorney exempt your spouse from some of the duties that normally an agent would have? Because with spouses who often co-own their assets, a direction not to commingle is really hard to follow. Do I mean that my wife and I are supposed to break up all of our joint accounts if she starts handling my affairs? Well, no, I didn't intend for that to happen. So I exempted her from the duty to not commingle. I exempted her from certain conflicts of interest, which would be impossible for her to avoid by virtue of the fact that we co-own things. Does your power of attorney limit the type of trusts that your agent can create or fund? So we often use trusts in planning. There are lots of different kinds, and it would be really helpful if your power of attorney allowed your agent to interact or create those trusts for your benefit. Does your power of attorney prohibit your agent from contracting away your right to sue in court or to have a jury trial? Most of the contracts your agents are going to sign, like nursing home admission contracts and things like that, they'll have mandatory arbitration clauses that waive your right to litigate in court. Arbitration is a great thing. Love it. It's often very useful. But there are certain situations where it's better to be in court. There are remedies that you can only get in court that you can't get in arbitration, or the contracting party that you're working with may pick the arbitrator, and you may not want to use that arbitrator because that may be an arbitrator who makes most of their money handling arbitrations from the industry that you're contracting with. And so you're litigating on their turf, not on your own. And, there may be quicker, cheaper, more effective, more fair litigation forums to have. So if your agent is prohibited from agreeing to those kind of things, you're not going to get locked into those mandatory arbitration and waiver of jury trial provisions that are so often found in the contracts that agents are signing. So that is kind of what I wanted you to understand. I want you to go home and I want you to get out your power of attorney. I'd like you to read it. I'm willing to bet you've never read it if you have one. Really read it from beginning to end. You may have skimmed it. You probably didn't even read it before you signed it. You probably just relied on me or somebody like me to have done a good job in preparing it. And I'm telling you now, we didn't do a good job when we prepared it. And even if we did, the good job we did 10 years ago may not be the good job that you need today. And it's very difficult for people to know what to ask, which is really the purpose behind this presentation. So, go in and ask and talk about these things. And I'm willing to bet that even after you listen to all this today, and after I chide you to go read it, you're going to say, well, it's Thursday night, it's Law and Order night. I don't want to miss SVU, so I'm not going to go read it. But you really should read it. It's not going to work well for you if you don't. Let's talk about your healthcare power of attorney. And I'm going to see if I can flip through here and get to that, and I'll share that screen with you to emphasize my point. So with your healthcare power of attorney, we're going to see you need to do many of the same things. Does it appoint an agent who's making medical decisions for you, or are you making decisions in advance and telling your agent, I want to make sure that these decisions that I've made ahead of time are carried out? It can be written either way, and you may want it written one way or the other depending upon the circumstances. If you use the state healthcare power of attorney form that the legislature recommended, if you get into a situation of permanent mental incapacity, you're not even going to have the option of allowing your agent to make those decisions for you. It's going to ask you, if you fill out that form, to say whether you do or don't want therapeutic care, but it's not going to let your agent make the decision. It could have. There's nothing that says you can't amend the document to add that option, but most powers of attorney for medical decision making don't have that. If you make a decision in the document, like if you have a living will section that says I don't want tube feeding, can your agent override that decision? Or does the document say that it's just a suggestion? I don't care which way it reads. I just want it to say clearly one way or the other, whether this is your decision and it can't be changed by the agent, or this is your suggestion and it can be changed. Does it have anything in there about end-of-life care? You can have a separate living will document, separate from your power of attorney document. I like to merge them, but they don't have to be merged, but you might want to. It's a little easier, I think, to do that. Does it deal with periods of prolonged and permanent mental incapacity? Some will, some won't. Does it just talk about you can admit somebody into the hospital? That's what the old ones used to say, because we didn't have a healthcare power of attorney law before. Does it address mental health? We have a separate mental health care power of attorney statute. It's very different than the healthcare power of attorney statute. And if you have a history of mental illness and you don't have that kind of stuff in your document, you're probably not well prepared for mental health emergencies that you might need an agent to deal with. So not everybody should have that in there, but some people should. And particularly if they have a family history or their personal history with mental illness, it'd be much better prepared. And most people don't even know that there's a law about that. Does it address things like hand feeding if you have advanced forms of dementia? There's actually a very interesting debate raging among end-of-life care folk about whether or not it's appropriate to discontinue hand feeding for people with advanced dementia, and whether they should be allowed to say whether they want that or not, or whether agents should be allowed to make that decision on behalf of their principal. So if you're like me and you have a history of Alzheimer's running through your family, and it's entirely possible that I'll wind up with Alzheimer's disease, it would be much better for me to have at least addressed the kinds of care decisions that accompany a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, rather than just being silent in the document about that. Again, not everybody would need that. Not everybody would want that. But if you don't know that it's an issue, you can't very well have addressed it. Does it go into effect upon signing, or does it go into effect when you're incapacitated? I think it should go into effect upon signing. The standard of healthcare power of attorney is it's springing. Not as big a deal as it is with financial powers of attorney. I won't say that a springing healthcare power of attorney is horrible like it is with a financial power of attorney, but it may be ill-advised. If I'm in the hospital recovering from an appendix, an appendectomy, and I don't feel like fighting with, Blue Cross about why they didn't cover the surgical procedure the way I thought they should have, it may be difficult for my agent to get on the phone and fight with Blue Cross for me if Blue Cross says, well, he's not incapacitated. He's just Gilligan's Island is on, and he's in the hospital. He wants to watch Gilligan's Island. If it's a power of attorney that goes into effect immediately, I don't have to over worry about that issue. Again, can the agent name a successor? If I can't do that, I think they should be able to. Does it allow the agent to delegate authority in the same way that I talked about with financial powers of attorney? I think it should. Does it contain tiebreaker clauses? Does it allow the agent to name a co-agent? That can also be helpful. I'm the agent, but I want to name a co-agent just so I can bring somebody else into the decision-making process. Maybe at the time that I signed the document, I didn't think that was necessary, but my wife now understands that it might be helpful. Does it allow the same way? Does it contain a prohibition on agreeing to waivers of jury trials and binding arbitration clauses? So those are the kinds of things that your healthcare power of attorney should address. So when you go home tonight, you can look. Should you have a POLST? Should you have a DNR or a do not resuscitate order? Do you even know what those things are? Do you know if there's any statutory authority for a POLST? The POLST is we call it in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. It's kind of like a living will and a do not resuscitate order and a healthcare power of attorney got mushed all together, signed off on by the patient and signed off on by the doctor. Particularly good idea, but we don't have a law that says they're allowed in Pennsylvania yet. So maybe we will, maybe we won't. A lot of institutional, care institutions still use them. You might want to have one as a result of that. You might have a DNR as part of this, but again, should I have a DNR right now sitting here talking to you? Probably not. But if I had congestive heart failure, maybe I would want to have that. But that's an order signed by a doctor. That's not signed by me. I might agree to having it in my chart, but it's not done by me. It's certainly not, and it's not prepared by some lawyer out there. It's signed by the physician. It's a physician's order. You have a living will. Is it already part of your healthcare power of attorney? These are important things to look at as you're looking at your documents. And one particularly important issue for me, I think, is do you know the difference between therapeutic care, palliative care, and life-sustaining care? Those are the three types of care that are addressed in these documents. And if you're not sure about the difference, because therapeutic care and life-sustaining care can look a lot alike, they're completely different. They come up in different contexts. Living wills, for example, address only life-sustaining care and palliative care. They don't talk about therapeutic care. If there was therapeutic care available, you're not in living will land. And nobody should be looking at your living will. It'd be nice if your agent knew that too. Because a lot of doctors don't know that. A lot of hospital personnel don't know that. But if your agent knows that, you'll have a much better chance of making sure that the instructions that were given for end-of-life care don't get translated into instructions for emergency room care, which is not where anybody should be looking to read living wills usually. So think about those kinds of things as you're going through this process. But, I want you to go and read the documents that you have. I want you to read them before you sign them. If you're deciding that, wow, Bill was so impressive today, I'm going to run out and get these things. Read them before you sign them. Ask lots of questions. If you can't answer a lot of the questions that I posed on those slides we just blew through, you don't just need a document, you need a fair amount of education. Because that's part of the process. That's the holistic approach to incapacity. You have to be an educated consumer and you need an educated agent to act for you. So you can understand things like therapeutic care versus life-sustaining care. Greatly helpful to understand that when you're trying to fill out a living will and give instructions to somebody. So let's talk also about imagining if you are an agent, because I think that's a really big part of what will help you to do what you should do for your own planning. What would you want to know if you were going to be taking over somebody's finances or making medical decisions for them? Think about that. And as you're organizing your life, make sure you're providing that information to your agents. If you understood the assets of the person that you were taking care of, if you understood their goals in their financial planning, if you understood their preferences about how their money is to be spent or invested, if you understood how it was to be their preferences for their medical decision making, it would be much, much easier for you to act with confidence on behalf of a person. And so, you need to put your agents in a position where they do have a basic understanding of your assets. They do understand a basic set of goals that you have. Wouldn't it be nice to know their online passwords? How is somebody going to figure out your online passwords? I use a program called LastPass to organize all my passwords. So technically, I only need to give my agent one password, my LastPass password. Now, am I going to give that agent my password right now? No, probably not. But am I going to make sure my agent knows where to go to get it? And am I going to make sure that my agent and probably nobody else can get to it? Sure, I am going to do that. I don't need to tell them everything. I just need to tell them how to find out everything. It may be as simple as just going onto an Excel spreadsheet that I keep on my computer and pulling it up, because there they will find a list of all my assets, all my account numbers, all the institutions that I deal with, who my beneficiaries are, who my advisors are, who's my attorney, who's my life insurance professional, who's my financial planner, who are, what clergy do I talk to? All kinds of things like that can be listed there for them. Again, they don't necessarily have to know it now. Some of that would be nice for them to know, but they don't have to know it if you're particularly private. You can be transparent in the moment without being transparent all the time. And it's really in the moment that we need the transparency. So if you don't want to share all of your financial information with your kid, for example, who's going to be your agent, that's fine. I get that. But make sure they can come in and find out what they need to know. I'm astounded when people come in to talk to me about their estate planning and I say, tell me about your assets. And they basically can't. They don't know. What is this thing? Well, I think I have an annuity at, I don't know, something at, I think it's at Northwestern Mutual or something. They don't know what they have. They don't know why they have it. They don't know how it works. Well, if you don't understand your own savings, you can't possibly expect your agent to understand it. And so you've assigned them the job of having to do all the work that you should have already done. You'll not only be better for yourself in managing your own life if you understand these things, but you'll help them. And if you don't know what they are, you can't expect anybody else to know what they are for you. So you're going to have to get organized. You're going to have to just simply have good documents, but that's not enough. You're going to have to create a list of your assets somewhere. It's going to change over time. So keep it up to date. You don't have to do it monthly. You could just do it annually, for example. We're not looking for marksman kind of accuracy. Horseshoes and hand grenades will work just fine here, close enough, But I shouldn't find out that what I thought was a $10,000 account is really a $340,000 account, or vice versa. Create a list of your advisors, because again, even if you haven't listed all your assets, your advisors will know, but you may have more than one. Many people do. So having a list of who to go to will help a person fairly quickly put together a picture of your finances. Create a list of your medical conditions, the medicines you take, why you're taking them, any other preferences you have about medical care should be communicated to your agent in one form or another. If you have a will, many people don't, but if you do, and you should, then make sure that your will is known, or at least they know how to go about finding it. Make sure it agrees with your beneficiary designations. The guy I met with yesterday, he has a will that says he leaves his assets to his wife and his family, his siblings. She gets some, they get some. His beneficiary designations for all of his assets say everything goes to my wife. Now, if you're a sibling and you read a will that says he wanted me to get 60% of the estate, but everything is set up to go to the wife, who was only supposed to get 40%, what kind of family turmoil do you suppose that wife and those siblings are going to have? Pretty easy to predict a problem there. So if you're organized, you will spot that problem in advance, and you can decide if that's really the way you wanted it. As it turned out, it really was the way he wanted it. Except He didn't really want his will to read the way it read, so we're going to change the will. He really wanted it to go to the wife. Okay, well, then you should have a will that says that. But somehow he managed to wind up with a will that didn't say that. I'm not exactly sure why, but he doesn't have that. So you have to be organized. It's not hard, but you have to be organized. You have to talk to the agent. It's not enough to just ask if they're willing to help. You have to give them information that you think they'll need in order to do a good job for you. But you have to tell them who they can ask for assistance from. You have to tell them what you're trying to accomplish. You have to tell them about the decisions and how you make decisions about your medical care. You're never going to be able to explain to everybody exactly how you want to be treated if you're diagnosed with diverticulitis, or if you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, or you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. There are simply too many illnesses for you to possibly go through and have a conversation about that. Much more productive to have conversations about how you evaluate information. What are the core objectives? Dignity, independence, other kinds of things, relief from pain. And then seriously question whether what you're thinking is really true. There's a fascinating debate that goes on within the disability rights community about this underlying prejudice they perceive in a lot of people who would say better dead than disabled. So if an able-bodied person goes into a hospital with a problem, they'll be told, let's move you over to the ICU and let's get you treated. If the same person with the same problem goes in, but they're in a wheelchair, they'll often be looked at and be told, time for you to go. I mean, really, what are you living for? What do you have to live for? Isn't your life miserable already? Well, tell that to Stephen Hawking or Christopher Reeve, because maybe in the midst of their initial injuries or illnesses, they might have felt rather despondent, but they went on to have very productive lives. So think about that as you're thinking about your own care, and consider whether or not you might have a change of heart, that the way you look at it as an able-bodied person might not be the way you'd look at it as a person with that condition. A lot of people tell me, if I get old, just take me in the field and shoot me. I don't want to go to the nursing home. Well, there are no dead bodies lying around in the cornfields of Berks County. So somehow that's not happening. I suggest that there are a number of reasons that's not happening, not the least of which is people don't necessarily feel that way when they go to the nursing home. Tell your agent what matters to you. Give them context. And then remind them of their responsibilities. Make sure they understand this is a job that's significant, and you want it to be a job that is they can do easily, but at the same time, they will have a lot of responsibility, and make sure that they're capable of carrying that out. And then you're going to start that process all over again, just a couple of years after you get it done. Keep up with your organization, keep your agents informed, because if they're not up to speed, they're not going to be able to do anything. And the less equipped they are, the longer you'll have to wait for the care and assistance that you're hoping they can provide. So that's an important part of this process. It's really important to understand that life is going to fill in all the blanks. If you fill them in, great. If you don't fill them in, the world is going to fill them in for you. The world only fills in your blanks with answers that makes the world happy, makes you stop being a problem for the world. The only time the world really cares whether you are incapacitated and can't make decisions is when the inability to get a decision made is creating a problem for somebody else. We could really care less about you. The only person who's going to care about you is you. So you can wait around for the world to solve your problems, but if it's not a problem for the world, they're going to leave you behind. And if it is a problem for the world, they're going to give you the solution that works best for the world. People go to nursing homes because they're made to go there, not because they choose to go there. It was simply easier to put them there. And that can leave people feeling a little bit overwhelmed, but I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I want you to understand this is your life. You know this better than anybody else. This really isn't that hard. It just takes a little bit of time. And it's incredibly therapeutic if you try and work through this process and think a little bit I had never done this. I'd never taken my own advice until a few years ago. And I did take my own advice. And it was a surprisingly rewarding experience. Only took me about a day to get my act together. And it's about time to update it again. But it was actually quite a pleasant thing. So I don't want you to feel like this is an overwhelming process. There's actually a nice silver lining that awaits you if you'll do this. You know, and it's not something that you really can necessarily do really, really quickly. You know, you just have to work at it and keep working at it. Baby steps will get you where you need to do. So grab a piece of paper, start writing down some things. And I think you'll find that you'll give yourself a great deal of peace of mind. You'll have nice documents in place if you work with good people to get them. And you'll have nice conversations with your loved ones who you intend to help you. And, you know, as part of that whole process, you know, I think you'll come away with an ability to get the care you need. Your agents will be much, much happier with you if you do that. So because it's important, you need to do something about it. And I'll mention the nursing home thing because I hear it all the time. You know, everybody tells me they don't want to go to a nursing home. Well, yeah, no duh. So if you don't want to go to a nursing home, simply saying, I don't want to go to the nursing home is no way to make sure you don't go to a nursing home. Sorry, Missy, I know the Heritage is now opening up a nursing home, but nobody wants to go there. But they need to go there and they want to go somewhere good. They don't want to get thrown into the old Motel 6 that got turned into a nursing home. That's not good. You know, it might be nice to go to a nice one. But just saying I don't want to go there doesn't get you not to go. It's, you know, people go to nursing homes because it's simpler for the rest of the world to put them there than it is to take care of them. And in many cases, they can't be cared for at home. I don't care how much they want to be cared for at home. So if you want to stay home, you better do the work that's necessary to make sure that when you might need a nursing home level of care, you've done the things that will allow the world to put you in your home and know that you're going to be properly cared for. As it turns out, that's going to cost quite a bit of money in most cases, a lot more than maybe it would cost if you went to a nursing home. But it doesn't happen because if I send you to the Heritage, Missy's going to come out. She's going to open up her arms and she's going to say, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're glad to have you. Look at all the cool things we have to make sure that you're going to get great care. And if I look at your house, what am I going to see? Nothing. There's nobody there. Or maybe somebody comes out, maybe your daughter, well-intentioned as she is, with no background and no support and no equipment. And she says, I want my dad to come home. What do you think the world's going to decide? They're going to give you the Missy every single time, as they should, because you didn't do anything to make sure that that option that you said you wanted had a chance of coming to life. If you don't, you're going to be in a nursing home faster than you can say blood-sucking lawyer, which is what I hear most of the time when I talk to people about this kind of stuff. So embrace this process. It's important. It is fulfilling, and it will serve you very well. And just recognize it never stops. It just goes on because your life keeps going on. As long as your life changes, your planning has to change. As long as you're in the process, you won't be overwhelmed. You just have to get started. So I think I've hit my time. Deb said I absolutely had to be done by 9:15, so I got a minute to spare. Let me see if I got any questions that people want to. Here's a good question. Is it reasonable to assume that all attorneys can produce a proper will? No. I work in a firm of about 14 lawyers. I would allow 2 of them to write my will. If I asked most of them, they would say, oh, sure, I could draft a will. And then I end up having to fix them. They're well-intentioned. Lawyers all think that they should be able to do that, but no, they can't. You know, you don't go to bankruptcy lawyers to get your wills done. You don't go to estate lawyers to get your bankruptcies filed. So no. Would it be advisable to take a power of attorney to from a general practice attorney to an elder law attorney? Yes, I think it would be. Much better to find out that it stinks now than to find out it stinks when you're incapacitated and cannot make decisions for yourself. Now, do you have to come to me? No. I'm certainly not the only attorney that does this kind of thing. I do happen to be one of only a handful of attorneys that do this kind of thing. But I suspect there'll be more of me in the future as our population continues to age. So let's see if we have any.
Yeah, there's another. Many of their patients are low income, and how can they address those who feel they can't afford legal advice and want to just default to Act 169?
Well, I'll tell you one quick answer to that question. If you go make an appointment, if you're low income and you make an appointment at Berks Encore because you want to meet with an attorney to help them prepare a will and powers of attorney for you and do it for free, you'll likely wind up with me. So you can have me for free if you go through Berks Encore to get it. If you're low income, I'll happily do that. There are a couple other attorneys that volunteer in that program too, so you might not necessarily get me, but that's, I think, probably one of the better ways to do this.
That's good to know. Absolutely. And it's a very good advice. One other piece of advice I want to give on a personal note: if you are someone's power of attorney, go ahead right away, whichever insurance company that they are with, make sure that insurance company has that power of attorney stat, because you don't want to try and make sure it's on file in the middle of a crisis or in the middle of a situation where you're trying to make sure the information, where you're appealing a decision that they made to go to a nursing home, because it just delays. And then you're in the middle of a pile of poo-poo.
Yeah.
So just
I would say the same thing about banks. And it's much easier if I'm going to do a power of attorney and I'm going to name, my wife or my son as my agent, I can go to the bank and give the bank that power of attorney. The bank will be much quicker to accept that document if I turn it over and ask them to update their records than if my wife or child walks in with that document. They're going to be inherently suspicious, but they will tend to not raise any questions whatsoever if I come in. And of course, you can take the agents with you, but the point is that's part of that preparation process. And thank you, Deb, for reminding me that I should have included that in my remarks. But do that with insurance companies, investment firms, health insurance companies, banks, anybody that you think your agent's going to have to deal with. Going in and assuring that these third parties, that this person really is the one you want to act. If the teller brings up the screen and it says that my son is the agent, they'll probably never ask anything about it. But getting them to put my son on the screen as the agent, that can be really, really hard. But it's much easier if you do a lot of that legwork with or for them.
Yeah, and then Brittany had asked, what if the bank denied my POA paperwork?
They do it all the time. They do it all the time. They usually do it for invalid reasons. And we usually end up fighting with the bank's legal department about why a power of attorney signed with a blue pen is still valid. A power of attorney signed 9.5 years ago is still valid. We don't have expiration dates on financial powers of attorney. We do on mental health powers of attorney. They have a two-year kind of a expiration date. But a financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, no expiration date, no requirement that it be signed with a particular color. You can use all 64 colors of crayon to sign your document. It's still valid. They just make this stuff up. Yeah. I don't know how else to explain it. It's irritating.
It is irritating.
It happens all the time.
Yeah, which is why it's important that you are the one who present it. But yeah, just to help to avoid that. So it is worth the hour or so that it takes to just sit down with the person that you want to be your agent to discuss all of those things. So I thank you so much, Bill, for being here. See what I said in the beginning? And we'll edit my thing a little bit too in the beginning. I lost my train of thought there. But we thank you all so much for coming. There will be a poll launch, just a very short one. Please take the time to answer the questions. Consider going to circleoflifecoalition.org and hitting donate. Next month, we will be having a speaker It's June 3rd, Grief, The Journey Through Love's Shadow by Mr. Randy Doty, who's a very engaging speaker. We will also be celebrating this year Margaret Gore, who joined us today. We'll be celebrating her life's journey with Circle of Life Coalition and the dedication to Circle of Life, as well as all of those things that are important to planning for the future and enabling everyone to discuss those things that have to do with our journey in life and end of life. So we'll be so pleased to celebrate her also in June. So I hope you're able to join us. But let's just make sure that there's not any more questions. I don't think so. But certainly you can ask them here, ask them all the time, and we'll be happy to answer them. Again, this is recorded. It will be posted on Facebook and at circleoflifecoalition.org. Did I forget anything, anybody? It certainly has been a day for me to make some mistakes. So please speak up, board members, if there's anything that I forgot. And we thank our sponsor again, too, from Green Hills for presenting. Oh, I forgot the fundraiser. Green Hills should have a team if you're not already. We will be having a live October 16th, 2021 fundraiser from 1 to 3. Get a team together, come and bowl. There will be prizes. We will have fun. We will be in person. We might still have to wear masks, but gosh darn it, we're going to have some fun in person. Please consider coming and having some fun with us. But anyway, thank you everyone for coming. Please fill out the poll. Please come June 3rd and celebrate with us and listen to our speaker.
Thank
Yay,
you
Bill.
for having us again.
Sure. Have a good morning, everyone.